Today we are going to be talking about several things. We're going to describe how scientists study subjects in which experiments are not possible, and we're going to explain the importance of curiosity and imagination in science. So, what we're going to be looking at is something called the correlation method. A. There are times when an experiment cannot be performed. For instance, if we want to do an experiment about stars in another galaxy, we can't go there and actually do the experiment, so we have to find another way to do that. So, one time when you can't perform an experiment would be, number one, when it is impossible. So another example would be, what was Earth's climate like 60 million years ago? Well, we can't look at it 60 million years ago because we weren't there. Number two, when it would be unethical. So for example, does smoking cause lung cancer in humans? Well, it would be unethical for us to take human beings and have them smoke for an experiment to see if cancer would happen in their lungs. B. When experimenting is impossible or unethical, scientists examine correlations. C. Correlations are reliable associations between two or more events. So it means taking two events and comparing them and then using what you saw there to then draw conclusions about something else. For example, tree rings and the failure of the Roanoke colony. The Roanoke colony, remember, was a group of people who settled in the United States in the 1500s, and at the time there were people from the colony who then sailed back to England. Well, when they came back several years later, the entire group of people had disappeared that they had left behind. They could not find a trace of them. And scientists, no one actually knew what had happened to them. Well, what finally happened was scientists began examining tree rings. If you look at this picture right here, the rings, when there is little growth in the tree, then the rings are close together. And when there is a lot of growth in the tree, like right here, the rings are further apart. Well, during years where there's not much rainfall, then you're not going to get much growth in the tree. Well, if you'll look right here, what they discovered was that during the years right here, whenever this colony was in existence, look how close the rings are together. There was an extreme drought during that time period. Well, what scientists also looked at was Jamestown, which was in existence about 20 or 30 years later, and it was also a drought during that time period. So what they said was that when the rings are close together, it indicates little growth during a drought. Roanoke was founded during one of the worst droughts in several centuries, which meant there was not enough food for the settlers. So scientists then believed, and historians, that what probably happened was, because there wasn't enough food due to lack of rainfall, that the settlers, some probably starved to death, but that there were others who probably ended up being absorbed into Indian tribes that were nearby in order to be able to have something to eat. So that's what we mean by correlation. They looked at tree rings and they used those to come up with an explanation for what may have happened to the colony at Roanoke. D. There is no single scientific method. In addition, the steps of the scientific method can be repeated as needed. So we use the scientific method as a way to solve problems, and yes, there are parts of it that are always usually there, but they're not necessarily always, it doesn't necessarily always happen in the same order. E. There are several habits that good scientists share. Number one, curiosity. Number two, skepticism, which means they don't believe everything they're told. So in other words, they're curious about something, so they start trying to find out about it. However, they're also skeptical in that they want someone to have to prove it to them instead of them just believing everyone's word for it. Number 3, openness to new ideas. Number 4, intellectual honesty. Yes, everyone hopes that what they discover turns out to be something wonderful, and they may spend years and years working on it, but if they discover new information that proves that what they have discovered is incorrect, then being honest enough to share that with other people instead of ignoring the fact that what you discovered is correct, that would be intellectual honesty. Number 5, imagination and creativity. So all of these are things that you will see with someone who is a good scientist. And that's all for today.